Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to this morning's Student in the Workplace virtual connection. My name is Ann Conti. I work for the Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit, or IU5, and we are able to present these sessions in conjunction with Northwest PA Job Connect, and we are happy to have their support throughout our entire program. This morning, we have Nate Elder with us. He's an HR generalist, for Franklin Bronze. He's going to tell us what that means. And if you're out there and you're thinking, I don't even know what HR stands for, he's going to cover that too. Before we get started, just a few logistical things. We will have time to take questions from everyone who's out there tuning in. Somewhere on your screen, for a lot of you, it'll be the top right corner, but somewhere on your screen, you're going to look for a little chat bubble that has a question mark in it. When you click on that, you'll be able to submit a question. We'll be monitoring the whole time and make sure we get to all those questions by the end. So feel free to submit if you have any questions for Nate as we're going through the next half hour. But without further ado, I'm going to send Nate live. Nate, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Like she said, I'm an HR generalist, a human resource generalist at Franklin Bronze. We're an investment casting foundry. What that means is we take ceramic molds and we pour molten metal into them to make parts, and we make them for different industries, some industrial parts, some for the glass industry to make bottles and stuff. I won't get too much into that unless you have questions about it specifically. I guess to start off, some of my roles here include hiring, the interview process, unfortunately sometimes termination or when someone's departing, like to find another job, that whole life cycle of the employee. I also do a lot of the benefits management. That would be the medical, vision, dental, short-term disability, some of those extras that we offer employees. I'm always looking to make sure that we're current with what we're paying. So I'm always checking wages, like keeping up to make sure we're treating our employees to same as what other companies are doing. What else do I do? There's a lot that happens. A lot of it, I have an open door policy. I try and keep my door open too for people that have questions or concerns. Like there's a lot of, especially everyone knows this year has been rough. So there's a lot of people coming in, with issues that they need for home, or they're asking about what our insurance does or resources that we have in the community. So I spend quite a bit of time, as much as I can, also doing outreach for the community, like finding those resources that our employees can use. There's a lot. We're in Venango County, and there's a lot here that is actually available that people don't always know about. So I'm trying to connect people with those resources too. Along the outreach part of that, we do a lot in the community. I do food drives and some clothing drives around Christmas. Right now we're doing a clothing drive. So I'm always trying to maintain that connection to the community as well. So we're engaged with what's going on. More about my job. Some of it's more, I hate to say it, but some of it's more tedious. There is a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of organization involved, making sure that there's a lot of due dates, like whether it's federal requirements for reporting for like the ACA reporting or equal opportunity employment reporting. So it's always maintaining those records and keeping that together. That's managed though. Thankfully for me, we have a system that helps with that. We use a computer program that helps maintain a lot of that. So it's not so much the paper part anymore, but definitely organization is required. Trying to think. What interested me in what I'm currently doing, why I got into this job, I guess to give you all a little bit of a background, I didn't start out in this job. I actually started out in one of our production areas. It's what we call the wax room, and it's pretty much where everyone would start out coming on board. It's running a wax injection press. But while I was doing that, I was also going to school, to college. So when I started part-time, I was a student. I earned my bachelor's while I was here, and then I took a promotion into maintenance because that let me have a more flexible schedule then, because I wanted to pursue my master's also. So I moved to maintenance so I could work. Actually, I worked, I think, 4 a.m. to 1 or something, and then I would do grad school in the afternoon. So I did that for a while, and then the opportunity came to move into this department. And with my having the educational background and the experience here on the floor, they valued that I knew what it was like to be a production worker, so I could relate to, what concerns employees have now. So then with my degree and the experience, I took this role, and I've been in it for almost 2 years now, but there's definitely still a lot to learn. It's quite a bit different from being in production, and to have this role, because in this role too, there's a lot of confidentiality involved. So going from on the floor, being able to talk more casually with everyone, now I guess I wouldn't call it a negative to this position, but there's really, when someone comes with a concern, like, I'm their only contact, and I have to keep it that way. Even from, like, the GM doesn't necessarily know when someone's having a concern. Like, I have to redirect to make sure that they know, like, why this person might be having attendance issues or something, and that we're working on it, and that it's not a concern. So there is some stuff that I have to be a filter for. So that's I wouldn't say one of the things I like least, but it takes being aware of what you're saying when you're saying it in this position.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Nate, it sounds like you wear a lot of hats, and maybe that's why the term generalist is in your title, right? Well, we've heard a little bit about, your responsibilities and what you're doing. Can you maybe drill that down to, what does a typical day look like for you? And I know every day might be different, but like, when you get in, how does your day start? What are some of the tasks that happen every day? And, what does it normally look like?
A typical day, I'm pretty fortunate to have a fairly flexible schedule. So I'll come in at 7, I check my emails, I check my mailbox to see if anything came in. Through my emails, every day I get a report that's generated out of that system I was talking about that manages all the reporting for me. And that generates a report for overtime hours and attendance hours. So then I have to fill that out into another report that we send to the supervisors, the department supervisors, so they know where we're at with our employee hours. After I do that, I have another report that I have to send to corporate then for overtime hours also. So it's a lot of paperwork and catch up in the morning. Like I said, usually in the emails, there might be someone having a question about payroll or their time and attendance, is what we call it. So if a supervisor has an issue with, someone punched in late or forgot to punch in, so I take care of that when I first come in and do some of that, more of the attendance issues when I first come in. Throughout the day, depends. Generally, like I said, my door's always open, so I'm always having someone come in for something. I'm right beside our safety person, so I have a little bit of responsibility with safety also. Like, I'll be at least a first contact sometimes, so people will come in and discuss safety issues with me, stuff like that, to get that handled. As an example, then after that, depending on whether we're hiring or not, right now we're hiring, so I'll check job boards, kind of get a feel for what other people are doing, like how their level of business is, but also to see if there's anyone actively searching for a job. Kind of go through that. Sometimes it's not, a lot of my day isn't formal because stuff can happen, but usually I'll meet with the GM then. Like, once he comes in, after a couple hours, I talk to him and we go over like I said, some of the attendance concerns, or if someone's off for illness or injury, we'll discuss where they're at, like when they're expected to return, especially with COVID, like we discuss if anyone's out related to that, when they're coming back, where the situation is in the plant. Obviously that's taken a lot of everyone's time, become a priority today. So
Right.
Then eat lunch.
Of course.
Break, yeah. And then in the afternoon, I'll meet with some of the department supervisors, because the way our production process is, in the morning they're still pouring out in the foundry, and then around 11 they quit, so a lot of the supervisors are freed up. So I'll go meet with some of them and address any of the issues they may have had with time card. So they don't have as much access. They can see the time cards, but they can't make corrections. So I'll meet up with them and do the corrections for that. And then touch base with operations manager, finance manager, and see where we're at with. Right now we're planning for the holidays, so we need to coordinate like what we're doing for the employees and make sure everything's in line for that. For our, it's not a Christmas party this year, but for what we're going to do this year, the gifts and stuff that we do for employees. Then that's probably as structured, honestly, as it gets, because like I said, stuff changes pretty quick. And people will come in and, like, I manage the uniform, so if someone has a damaged uniform, they'll come in and tell me when they need a uniform. A lot of it is employees coming and asking for stuff like that, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that gets interspersed in there too.
Yeah, so you've touched on a lot of what my next question is going to be here and there, but can you talk about some of those like more soft skills that someone would need if they wanted to work in human resources? So I've heard organization, it sounds like flexibility, a lot of that, but can you speak to some of those skills, you know, not necessarily the ones you're learning in the classroom, but what are those soft skills that you might need?
I would say definitely listening skills, because, you know, when someone comes in, and if you can listen to someone, but sometimes you don't always hear them. If I don't know if that makes sense, but it's really important to actually hear what someone's saying. If they come in and say they have something happened at home, their water pipe broke, and you just kind of dismiss someone, it doesn't do anyone any good to get so distracted that you can't really listen. I think that's part of it. You know, I might be in the middle of running a report, but it's important to stop and actually pay full attention to what someone's asking for at the moment. Public speaking somewhat would be a good skill. Like I said, with all the outreach I try and do as much as I can, like meeting with you guys, like being able to, hopefully I'm doing all right, but meeting with people, you know what I mean, giving presentations on what we do and stuff like that. Like I work with different colleges trying to get interns in, to have that stream of internships coming. So being able to communicate effectively with people is pretty key in this role too. I'd say math also to some extent, because I do some payroll. Like the system we have does most of it. Thankfully, it's pretty good, you know what I mean? But you have to still correct it and check for it being accurate. So math, I wouldn't say it's like advanced math, but definitely basic math skills are pretty critical. Organization I already talked about.
Right.
Problem solving would be a big one, I would say, because like I said initially, I can't always break confidentiality, or I don't break confidentiality, I'm sorry. But because of that, you can't exactly pick someone's brain on a direct problem, so you have to be able to fix it or find a solution to maintain confidentiality without involving other people. So I think problem solving would be a big skill in this role.
Yeah. Yeah, you're touching on a lot. You know, we've done a handful of these now since October, and communication is a big one. It comes up, you know, regardless of what the position seems to be, that you need to be able to communicate with your colleagues, with your coworkers, and also that listening one comes up quite a bit as well. And I liked how you put it, that we need to be actually listening to understand and not just half listening and continuing and doing our work, that, you know, we won't be able to respond correctly if we're not fully with them. So I appreciate you putting it that way. But yeah, we're seeing a common theme that communication is important and that being able to work with other people. But I also liked your point about problem solving, and you brought it up in a unique way that I don't think we've heard so far, that sometimes in our roles we're going to deal with things that are confidential, and you're going to have to be able to problem solve those ones on your own. And so having that skill set is going to be critically important.
Yeah, and then along that line too, I wouldn't say I'm completely, it's not that I don't have resources that I can reach out to, because there's
Sure.
local HRs and we have a corporate HR, and we have different organizations that we're members of that we can use as resources. But it's, again, being able to identify who I need to ask what of, you know, to find a solution. Sometimes it's not necessarily that I have to think of it, the solution, but it's knowing who to ask, I guess, that I can ask.
Yeah, yeah. And that makes sense. And I think important to know your people too, for sure. Yeah. And you mentioned math, but it sounds like, you know, for folks out there who might be a little bit wary on math, that it isn't advanced math skills, it's just your basic level. Yep. So yeah, so that's good for folks out there. I do want to send another reminder out there. I can tell you, Nate, I had a couple people on my end say they weren't seeing anything, but we got it fixed. I think we were just hearing and not seeing. But for those folks who did join late or maybe had a technical issue, just a reminder of where the question tab is. You'll look for that little chat box with a question mark in it, and you can submit questions, although I think some people have already found it. But Nate, if you could just start off by answering, can you tell us what your favorite part of your job is? And then we'll follow up with maybe what's your least favorite part of your job. So let's start with favorite. Let's start with the good one.
Favorite, I really like being able to talk to the employees and have an impact on what happens in the plant. Different things we do, like employees might give me feedback and say, for this year, for our summer picnic, can we do this or that? And then I'm able to talk to the GM or whoever and kind of organize it more towards the way they would want it, or what would benefit them, instead of me just saying, this is, you know, what we think without your input type situation. I really like that, especially, like I said, coming from being on the floor, being a production worker. I think that helps me to relate to people better. So I like being able to do that, to help steer things towards more beneficial for the employees.
Yeah, well, I'm sure for you, having the experience of being on the floor, that helps you empathize and see the perspective through their eyes as well. So good experience probably to have. So let's flip that question. What's something that maybe you don't like about your job? And I always preface this by saying, you know, we know that, you know, not every job is going to be 100% perfect. Just because you don't like one thing doesn't mean you don't like your job. And that's for our participants out there.
It's probably you probably heard this a lot, but I think probably the paperwork would be one. Like, there is a lot of paperwork. For anyone that would be interested, just be aware that there is a lot of paperwork, and it's not my favorite thing of it, but it is what it is.
Yeah. We do hear that a lot, actually, and not just for HR, but for a lot of positions. When we ask that question, nobody likes paperwork, right? It's nobody's favorite part of their job. So we have a question coming through. I think it's a good one. So why do you think employees are afraid of HR? And just to follow up, there's my dad said, anytime someone is called the HR, it's bad.
I think from my perspective, I'm new to the role. Like I said, from my background, I try and be able to empathize with the employees but I do know HR, you see in movies or TV shows when someone gets called to HR, it's never good. But I think here, and the company in general tries to be employee-centered, so we try and help the employee. It's usually never to punish. You know what I mean? It's more up to address issues. Like I said before too, it's, when someone has a family situation and they need help with, it's like trying to do the outreach and find the resources for them more so. Obviously some of this role, it isn't always fun. Like sometimes we have to discipline people and sometimes we have to terminate people. But usually, at least my experience in this role at this facility, is that we try and give everyone as much chance as they can to either explain themselves or to correct an issue before we go that far. So I do admit that HR does sometimes have that authoritative, like I'm going to get in trouble, like going to the principal's office. But I think from what I've heard from other HRs, I think they're trying to change that too. Like all companies are sort of trying to go more towards what can we do to help you instead of just punish you type position, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think it definitely does, and I think some of the like keywords you use there, like employee-centered, helping them find resources, that there's a lot out there that HR does that's really positive. It just might not be the things that you hear about, right? We hear about the bad. We don't always hear about the good. You kind of answered this in your previous answer, but I'll ask it. Have you ever had to fire anyone?
Yeah, and we've had to. It's been a little while, but I have had to fire a couple people. It's never been. Usually, they knew what they did. The ones that I've had in my limited experience, they knew what they did. They saw it coming, and there wasn't any. It wasn't animosity. Like they weren't angry. They understood, and I don't know how to really explain that other than it does happen, unfortunately. Sometimes it's, like I said, being here working on the floor before, then I know people, and sometimes it's people that I do know, but if they do something so out of line with what our company policy is, then unfortunately we do have to terminate people.
Yeah, I imagine it makes it a tiny bit easier if they know that it's coming, but I'm sure that can't be easy regardless. Not the fun part.
No, that's one of the not fun parts too.
Right. Paperwork and terminating people. Yeah, absolutely. Now you spoke a little bit about how you were you worked for the company while you were getting your degree. Can you speak a little bit about maybe that and what your degree is in, and just how you found yourself in the role that you're in? You touched on it a little bit, but just what qualities do you think you had, and how do you think you kind of made your way into the position? Because it sounds like obviously you worked your way up to it.
Yep. Like I said, when I first started here, I was part-time and going to school full-time. I was going to Clarion University for my bachelor's in psychology. I was looking more towards a career in mental health, counseling, or psychology. And then I ended up getting hired full-time, and I knew that I wanted to pursue my master's. So while I was full-time employee and I was pursuing my master's, I ended up going to Edinburgh for community counseling. Again, thinking of pursuing that. But something I had a discussion with like all of the students that I knew when we were going to Edinburgh, we're talking about, what would we do when we got our degree? Like what field would we go into? Family-based, independent private practice type thing. But HR did come up quite a bit because I think, like we talked about, the listening skills and public speaking, all of that, that's part of the counseling degree. Like a lot of what you're doing is learning how to listen, learning how to pick up on key words of what people are saying to better understand what they're really needing. And then paperwork. When I was going to school, paperwork, I should have been prepared because I should have been used to it. But I think that's kind of when the role came available here, that's part of why when they talked to me about the role, that's why they picked me or thought I would be a good fit, because not only did I have that, production background of being able to relate to everyone on the floor, but I also had the degree from Edinburgh that showed that I could, I was good at paperwork and active listening and
Yeah.
being able to
Well, and
empathize.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because in our previous conversation with someone in HR, they said, a background in psychology or anything like counseling isn't a bad thing, because oftentimes you're doing that on some sort of level, and you have to know people and you have to be able to work with them, and having those types of backgrounds actually are really helpful. So you just kind of confirmed something we learned earlier in this series as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of people that went in the program of counseling, I think their HR was a consideration, like I said, because of the skills you learn there.
Yeah.
How they can apply to HR.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So another question coming through: how do you set someone's salary or pay? Or do you? So I guess it's kind of twofold.
I don't specifically set it. It's a coordination with me, the GM, plus what corporate will allow us to do, depending on where we're at, business-wise, business level-wise. But when I'm looking to compare our salary to other people, I will look at the Department of Labor and Industry statistics that way. And then I honestly can't remember what the name of. I'd have to look and find it. But there's I think it's through the state. You can search wages, local wages for the county specific. I forget the website, but I'll use that to see what it's like. The wages are like in the immediate area, and as much as I can, I compare what our guys are making to what other industries that are similar are making. But in a smaller area like this, you still have to be competitive with everyone. It's not just competing with other foundries. We have to compete with well, for example, Rural King just went in, so we have to be able to be competitive with them even.
Yeah.
To make sure we retain people. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely gives your perspective on what you take into consideration for all of that, and the work that goes into setting the salaries and the pay and being competitive. So just a couple more questions. You had mentioned that you might be involved with the interview process. To you, what's something that makes someone stand out in an interview?
Someone that stands out in an interview for me is someone that you can tell is listening to what we're saying, the job will entail, not over talking someone. I look for the same thing in them as what I try and do, is that they're listening, because what we do, it's critical that everyone can work in a team, and we need to make sure that people are listening to their other team members when they're doing something. At a basic level, making sure they show up on time is a big one. People that are late for an interview, like, it depends. Like, the people, and we understand that stuff happens, someone might be late, but the person that's interviewing that would call us and say, oh, I'm running 10 minutes late, is, I don't want to say better, but it looks better in the interview if they communicate with us that they're going to be late than showing up and saying, oh yeah, sorry I was late. So again, communication to make sure that we know what's going on. Having a good resume is another key thing. I don't know, in my limited experience, I know a lot of companies might not see job hopping as positive, but it's not necessarily negative. Like, we also like to see people with a diverse background. I think that's a positive to know that they're bringing a lot to the table when they come to us. Stability, you can look at it either way. I try not to say someone that job hop, like you're trying to find something in your career that you like. But here we have so many different positions. Like, I worked up from production to where I'm at. So in an interview, I accept or try and be understanding of someone that might have a varied job history. What else? Yeah, as far as like with being a foundry, I don't really dress code when someone shows up to interview. Usually I tell them to wear work boots and not their best clothes here, just because we'll take them on a tour and it's a foundry. It can get pretty dirty.
Right. Right.
So
yeah, I think all good advice, and I like your perspective on resumes and also just again communication. We came back to that, communicating and being a good listener as early as the interview process.
yeah, and but it's not necessarily that there's might be a lot of different jobs in someone. It's having a good, clear, defined like timeline, like a well-presented resume. It's not necessarily that you might have had a lot of jobs. It's that you are able to put it together, because some of everything we do here in every department has some sort of paperwork to track the jobs even. So knowing that your resume is put together well also is a plus, a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nate, I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to end with kind of the final question we ask everybody. If you could give, like, our high schoolers, our seniors out there, any piece of advice as they're moving on and navigating what comes next, what kind of last words would you leave them with?
I guess the last words I would leave you with are, I know whenever I went to school, like everyone said, you have to go to college, you have to get a degree, but there's such a big resurgence of manufacturing that it's not a bad thing to get a degree, but it's not necessary to get a good paying job. Like it's not just into HR here, but there's different ways of promotion here. Internal, a lot of businesses now will reimburse for school. So if you get in and you have the interest in that field and you're interested in what you're doing, a lot of places will help promote you and push you through to do more at what you're doing. I think it's good to like what you do for a living.
Yeah.
versus listening to what other people are telling you should do. Sometimes it's good to like what you do for a living.
Right. I think all good pieces of advice, and I think a common theme for us too has been, throughout these is that, college isn't the only way. It's not the only pathway. It's just one of the pathways.
Yep.
So I just want to say thank you to our participants out there who submitted questions and who joined us for this call. And then also thank you to Nate again for joining us for the last half hour and telling us everything about your work and answering all of our questions. So thank you to Nate and everyone out there. And please keep an eye on our website. As always, we've got a couple more of these just through the next 2 weeks. So we're wrapping them up here, but keep an eye on the website for any other sessions we will be having. And I wish everyone a happy Friday and a good weekend. So thanks all.